welcome on in, live from Manhattan, New York. This is the Handicap Sports Podcast. I'm your host, Jay-Z Sports, and with me, a very special guest, creator of the Inside Golf Podcast, data analyst for RickRunGood.com. He does the Monday article. He does the Tuesday weekly fantasy ranking article. He does the Wednesday final DK thoughts and weather article. Golf Digest contributor, odds checker contributor, the golf architect savant himself, none other, Andy Lack. Andy, appreciate you coming on, man, and it's good to meet you here.
Thanks, man. I sorry that you had to get through that mouthful of stuff. It's a lot that I have on my plate these days. First of all, I didn't know. So, are you from New York? I didn't know you were a New York guy. I see the Saquon Barkley jersey in your background as well.
Yeah. Little Barkley action. So originally from Jersey, moved to New York. So
what
now.
Part of Jersey?
Morris County.
Okay, yeah, I believe that's where my buddy Chris Powers is from, or in that area.
Okay. Do you know
what is that? That's like you're in Morris County. That's within what, like 30, 40 minutes from the city?
Exactly, 30, 40 minutes from the city, like close to Bergen County.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Like 30, 40 minutes outside the city.
I'm from New York originally. I grew up in Manhattan. Where are you living in the... I grew up... Well, we moved a couple times, but originally Upper East Side and now Upper West Side. What about you? Where are you in Manhattan?
I'm in Chelsea right now. Me and my girlfriend live together. So
it's a good place to live, man. Chelsea's awesome.
Yeah. We just moved in early January, so been loving it.
Awesome, man. That's cool to hear. I love that area.
So Cali or New York?
New York.
Food,
all New York. Long. Yeah, New York by far. I basically moved to California to finish up school. I went to Loyola Marymount in LA. And I stayed basically because, it was right around when the pandemic was kicking off, and I joined a golf club out here, and I love that I can play golf, year round completely. But no, my heart will always stay with New York. I consider myself a New Yorker at heart, and I spend most of the summer in New York as well. Both my parents still live in the city, and they're divorced now, but both have places in the city. So I luckily, I'm in a position where I can pretty much work from anywhere. So I'll spend like 9 months out of the year in California, but then be back in the city for like June, July, August, and December, basically.
Nice. Any plans on moving back here full time, or you think Cali long term?
I think Cali long term. I mean, I did just join a golf club in the state of New York, but it's in upstate New York, so I doubt that will bring me back to New York full time. No, I like California. I would say again, like I think New York has my heart, but I think logically it makes more sense to be in California. I like the way that the timing zone with sports here is a lot more conducive to my work schedule. I like that stuff finishes earlier. Yeah. I can play golf again, 365 days a year, and I belong to an awesome club out here that I wouldn't want to lose. So I think like California still long term makes the most sense for me.
Yeah, and definitely hear that time thing. Like for the NFL stuff, you got Sunday Night Football. Next thing you know, it's like 6 o'clock. You could go get dinner or whatever. Over here, it's Sunday night, getting ready for work. So I totally hear
your
you
sports, some of the sports and some like football games end at like midnight sometimes.
It's ridiculous, and don't even get me started with the college football finals. That thing starts at like 9. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. But yeah, anyway, appreciate you coming on. I kind of wanted to talk to you about your beginnings in golf, your beginnings in sports media with golf, and getting into that, like, your love for architecture, your love for the analytics, and then we'll close down the show and getting into some Honda stuff. But to start, what a weekend at Riv, man! The emotional home in the presser, the Donovan John Rahm, Tiger Woods playing a full four. I mean, you attest to it all the time. The Riv is just a special place, and the Jenny is just an unbelievable tournament. And you were there. You were there for a couple of days, right?
Yeah, I actually only ended up going on Friday, but I was there all day on Friday. Caught a lot of Tiger. Luckily, I had inside the ropes access for that week, so that allowed me to actually see Tiger hit golf shots, which is pretty cool and not something that I've never been that close to Tiger in my life. I've never been able to have that close access point to him and get to see him really hit golf shots. And then I followed a lot of Rahm, a lot of Cantlay, a lot of Hovland. So it was a blast, man. That is one of I would say that it's my favorite non-major tournament of the year, along with the Players. And yeah, I mean, it delivers. It always delivers. But yeah, I think there's a ton of great narratives in golf right now. I think it's an interesting and fun time to be a golf fan because you have Jon Rahm essentially emerging as the best player in the world. In my opinion, Rory is still right there, though. And now you have this kind of, in my opinion, top three, if you want to throw Scheffler in there, which I'm certainly okay with. I think some would put Homa in that category as well. I would still disagree with that in terms of I need to see a little bit more out of him outside the state of California. But essentially heading into the four majors, you have this top three of Rory, Scheffler, and Rahm, with Rahm currently kind of holding the belt right now. And then it's going to just be interesting to see if this, if anybody can kind of join that group or emerge. I mean, there's so many great players now. Your Cantlays, your Xanders, your Justin Thomases, your Victor Hovlands, your Cameron Youngs, all these guys that are kind of scratching the surface but aren't quite at that Rory Rahm level right now. I think it's going to be a really fun rest of the golf season.
Yeah, definitely. And the only thing I want to see is Rory get that green jacket, and
yeah,
I
me
really,
too.
And I really think that could happen. You just got to fix some things up with the flat stick. But yeah, I mean, so at the Riv, you being close to Tiger, what are some of the caddy Tiger and the caddy dialogues? What were some things maybe you heard that they were talking about? Anything caught your eye? Anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think my biggest takeaway with Tiger is that he's still, I mean, the sound that the ball makes off the club face is still as good as any player. I mean, seriously, when you're up close hitting, sometimes for example, when Jon Rahm hits the ball, it sounds different than when Denny McCarthy hits the ball, right? And that's only the type of stuff that you can pick up when you're really close to him. When Tiger hits the ball, when he hits a flush iron shot, it sounds every bit as good as some of the most powerful players in the world. That coming off the club face, it looks great. I think with him, it's more about, can this guy walk 72 holes of golf and stay in it for a full tournament? And there were certain times where it felt like the putter was the one thing letting him down, but his ball speed, and I didn't get to watch him on Sunday. I was just looking at the numbers and I watched his full round on TV, but his ball speed went significantly down on Sunday, right? On the first 2 days, he was driving it just as far as Justin Thomas and Rory McIlroy, two of the longest drivers on tour. And by Sunday, it did seem like a little fatigue set in. So for me, it's really about, can this guy keep it up for 4 days? I have no doubt in my mind that he can make a cut at the Masters, that he can make a cut at any major championship now. I really believe that he can make a cut at any of those. At the end of the day, he still finished 14 strokes behind Jon Rahm, right? So my questions at this point is, can we get past, I trust him to make a cut now. Can he contend? That is still the question for me.
Yeah, no, for sure. And my dad plays Riviera every single year, so we had a
nice
on the pod about Riviera, and the one thing he said, I want to hear your thoughts on this, and he said, Riviera's not that bad of a walk, and maybe that was one of the reasons why Tiger, you saw a little limp at the end, but he really stood strong for 4 long rounds. I wanted to kind of get your take on that regarding just the walk at Riv.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly not. It's nothing crazy. I mean, I probably logged like 15,000 steps on Friday alone, and I wasn't feeling tired by any means. It's not Augusta National. Now, I think one of the reasons why Tiger played this event is because there are a lot of similarities, just in terms of the questions that both golf courses ask you, between Augusta and Riviera. So, no, I think that Augusta is definitely going to be more of a physical challenge for him. I've played Oak Hill and I've played LACC. I haven't played Liverpool, but I think that Riviera falls right in line with an Oak Hill. I mean, I would say that if anything, Riviera is a tougher walk than Oak Hill. And if anything, Riviera is a tougher walk than LACC. So if he can do 4 days at Riviera, which again, to me, he didn't really prove that he could do 4 days at Riviera. I don't think he's going to have trouble walking Oak Hill. I mean, I played Oak Hill this summer. I just joined the club as a member. It's a relatively flat piece of land, and LACC has some interesting elevation changes as well. But no, there's more elevation changes. Your dad's right in the sense that it's not a crazy walk by any means, but none of the other majors are either.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. So exciting time to see him back, and very excited to see him, in the tournaments to come, plus the majors. Getting into the bulk of the things here, I just been seeing you, flooding all over, the golf industry and media and stuff like that. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of figure out, your beginnings. Like, where did your love for golf stem from? You played in college, I assume, but like the high school days early on. When did you first start, falling in love with the game? Was your pops, loved the game? That's how I'm into it now. So a little bit on that, and then we can move forward to, where you are now.
Yeah, of course. Really early age for me. I started playing golf I was probably 7 or 8 years old when I started playing golf. It was my grandfather for me. My dad doesn't play. He still doesn't play. But my grandfather on my mom's side was pretty big into it, and he was the president of a club on the East Coast that I believe is one of the best golf courses in the world. So I was very lucky to get to grow up playing a golf course, a CB McDonald golf course. So I kind of immediately fell in love with the game, and then I did the junior tournament thing. I started traveling across the East Coast. I played. I wasn't traveling to like the West Coast to play golf tournaments, but I did the whole AJGA thing, the whole junior golf thing, and got in. I pretty much competed my whole life up through high school, and high school, I would say that was the first time I was the captain of the golf team. I went to a really good high school for golf, one of the only high schools on the East Coast. I went to a boarding school in Connecticut, one of the only high schools on the East Coast that has a golf course on property. And that was the reason that I went. I kind of got semi-recruited to go there and play golf there, and absolutely loved it. But I also was kind of the first time in my life where I started to find some other interests as well. Growing up in New York City, definitely started to shift my attention a little bit away from like competing and practicing golf every weekend towards, going out on the weekends a lot of the times with my friends. So essentially, I would say that I played my best golf as a junior, and I compared to my competition, I mean, I hit the ball longer now than I do when I was a junior, but I got to the point where I had the ability still to go play golf at some D3 schools, but mainly like Northeastern, your Williamses, your Amhersts, your Kobe's, your Colgates, schools like that were good D3 programs, right? But not top of the end, D1 schools. And I did the whole college thing, and I fell in love with Duke. And I said to myself, I was already a little bit disillusioned by golf at that point because I'd spent my whole life traveling to these tournaments, competing, that I just said, listen, if I get into Duke, this is where I'm going. And I spoke to the coach, and he said, he looked at my resume, he looked at my high school scores. He said, listen, man, you could probably make this team as a walk-on, but I can't guarantee that you're going to play at all. And I said, all right, cool. I'm still gonna walk on and do this. And I got into Duke, and I went to the first couple of practices, and I was like, holy shit, these guys are so much better than me. And I joined a frat. So I literally went to like 3 practices before I ended up joining a frat instead. And I guess the rest is history. I ended up transferring to LMU on the West Coast. And then essentially when the pandemic started, and I graduated college, I got an internship at Golf Digest, and the internship at Golf Digest ended. They didn't hire me. It was a hiring freeze at the end of the pandemic, but I still made a lot of close friendships and relationships with the guys at Golf Digest that to this day are some of my closest friends in the industry now. So I basically said, this was incredible. I worked in high school. I worked in college. So I had saved up some money, and I basically said, okay, I'm going to take a year of my life to start a Twitter account, start a blog, start a golf podcast. And if nothing happens, and if I run out of money, then I'm just going to go into finance like all my friends, or be a PGA teaching professional or something like that. And, within about, for the first 3 to 6 months, no one listened to my podcast. And I mean, no one. But I just kind of got lucky one day on Twitter, and slowly it picked up steam, and the rest is history.
That's amazing, man. That's a sick story. So like when you were playing in high school and in college, like loving the game and stuff like that, were you always into the analytics side of golf, like the architecture side of golf? Like when did that really start coming into play with you, and you kind of started putting the puzzles together with that?
So I always had a little bit of interest in the architecture stuff because I grew up playing like an iconic golf course, the Creek. So I always had a little bit of interest in the architecture stuff. But I would say when the architecture stuff for me really, really took off was the internship with Golf Digest, because part of what I did at Golf Digest was I worked a lot on their 100 greatest courses. So I was doing a lot of the back end information for the 100 greatest courses. So essentially, I would see a rater review a golf course, and I would plug it into a spreadsheet, and I would read a lot of the reviews. So I would read what a lot of those raters were saying about the golf course, and saying things like, oh, this course had a lot of shot values because, the par fives on this course were asking certain questions of you, and there was a lot of non-homogeneity in the design. And, I started to kind of get with a little bit of the lingo and start to kind of think about golf, I guess, in a different way, and think, oh my gosh, like there's all these different reasons why a golf course can be good and bad. And so I'm reading all these reviews on all of these reasons why these raters think a golf course is good or bad. And I kind of went down a rabbit hole, and I ordered a couple books, and I read some of the books that I would recommend to anybody that is getting interested in architecture. The George C. Thomas has a great book. Tom Doak has a great book. There's a bunch of recommendations that I would have. But during that time that I, at the beginning after the internship ended, I really dove into the architecture side of things and kind of just went down a rabbit hole. And suddenly it became this passion for me that I could kind of fall back on.
Yeah, no, that's great. And the Monday articles on Rick Run Good, I mean, just how thorough you are.
Thanks, man.
And really, how deeply in that you get to it. It's an easy read. Like, it's an easy read to me. I don't know for, someone who's just looking at it, but like someone who's like, it's an easy read, and how thorough you are is special. But, going from there and going from like, realizing a course and realizing a player's tendencies, who plays well on X course, is that where kind of the betting thing kind of took off with you? Because like the betting thing obviously happened after you started getting into the architecture side of stuff, right?
Yeah, for golf, yes. So I always loved betting on football. Like in college, me and my friends bet on football. I mean, I remember the first bookie that I got was in college. And so at Duke, we loved betting on football. And I still love betting on football, but I never bet on golf. And I had always followed the PGA Tour, but I never even really thought about it, to be honest. I was never like, I should bet on golf. And even at Golf Digest, one of the other things that I did was they were starting to lean into gambling at the time, right? So this was in, I guess, now 2020, 2021 now, when gambling in golf was kind of picking up steam and becoming a lot more normalized. And at that time, Golf Digest was starting to do a lot more gambling content, which I kind of helped out on it as well. But I still never placed golf bets myself. And I think during that time, in that first year when I created my podcast, what the niche that I found, the reason why I created the podcast is because I started feeling like there were a lot of great architecture podcasts out there, and there were a lot of architecture podcasts that I liked listening to. Not a ton, but like the Fried Egg and stuff like that. And then I started getting into betting on golf too, and I started listening to a bunch of golf betting podcasts, right? Like the Mayo and Rick Gaiman, right? And one thing that I noticed was that there was no one that was doing both, right? The golf betting people were not talking about architecture at all. I mean, they would say what the course is, but they were not talking about architecture really at all. And so I said to myself, maybe there's an avenue here where I could use my knowledge and understanding of architecture to help me make some money betting on golf. And that has always been the foundational ethos of the podcast. It's like, okay, I'm going to be the person that blends architecture and betting together and actually uses my knowledge of architecture to help me win money betting golf. And guess what? It worked, right? There is value on understanding these courses at a deeper level and helping you. I mean, what it really helped me a lot of the time was, finding some of the long shots and the lower price guys, which I still think is one of my better talents. I'm better at picking long shots than I am at picking favorites. Because if you can figure out some of these guys' tendencies and understand things about, I'll just give you like a very simplistic baseline example, but like there is a big connection from Riviera to Augusta because they're both, golden age designs, right? And they were both come from architects that came from kind of the same school of design. And that's like a super basic one that everybody knows about, right? But like stuff like that, where I started looking at architects' certain works, and certain architects have certain tendencies. Like Jack Nicklaus always designs golf courses that favor faders of the golf ball because he faded the golf ball, right? So I started saying, okay, maybe there's a correlation here between guys that fade the golf ball and guys that play well on Jack Nicklaus courses. And what do you know? The guys that have been best on Jack Nicklaus courses are guys like Colin Morikawa and Justin Thomas, who both fade the ball, right? So just kind of combining stuff like that where, looking at an architect and saying, okay, this is the type of stuff that Tom Fazio does. This is the type of stuff that George Thomas does. This is the type of stuff that Alistair McKenzie does. And that and kind of using that to blend that with golfer tendencies, there was something there. And I think that's why the podcast and my writing was able to take off a little bit and find its kind of niche, was because that was the type of stuff I started talking about.
Yeah, no, that's great. And we'll have that same thing this week at PGA National, given that same fader the golf ball type thing. You bring up Rick Gaiman, and how you were following him for a little bit. When did he come into the picture? Because you're doing you have the Tuesday pod with him, and you obviously write for him. So I know he was at Digest. Did you guys meet at Digest? How'd that, relationship kind of come to be?
No, I actually reached out to him on Twitter during that time when nobody was listening to my podcast. And I said, and this is when people ask me for career advice for trying to break into the industry. This is the number one piece of advice that I would give people. And you did it already, so you already know it. But reach out to people that you like and respect their work and just say, like, hey, dude, I really love your work. Do you have any interest in coming on my podcast? And that's basically what I did with Rick. I reached out to him and I was like, hey, man, I think your work is awesome. If you want to come on my podcast, no pressure at all. I'm going to continue to love your stuff either way. But if you have any interest in talking, even off air, I would just love to pick your brain on some stuff. If you didn't want to come on my podcast, I just want to introduce myself as a big fan. And he said yes. And so he came on my podcast pretty early and we developed a friendship. And then around the time of December of 2021, I got hired by a company called The Score to be their main golf editor, which was kind of always my dream, to get that big job in golf media where, health insurance, and you're really The Score is a big company in Canada. They're like the Bleacher Report of Canada. Yeah. But I realized really quickly with their job that they had zero interest in me being able to write about the things that I wanted to write about. It was basically the most baseline job where your job was basically thinking of what emoji to put on a headline for an alert. The golf editor for them, which was not something that they cared about at all. They put all their attention into football and hockey and basketball. So basically I was just getting paid $70,000 a year to do an emoji headline when a golfer won a tournament, and that's it. Literally I didn't get to do any of the things that I liked. And I went to Rick and I asked for career advice. And I said, hey, I have this job. It's not what I thought it was going to be. What do you think I should do? Because they're paying me a lot of money and I can't make that much money just doing my podcast and writing freelance articles. And he basically said, why don't you work with me? Why don't you partner with me on the site, and I will pay you almost as much as what they paid you at The Score, but I will also present you with opportunities. Any opportunity that comes my way, I will give to you. And that's how I started with Odds Checker too. But he was basically just like, look, dude, I think you're really talented and I believe in you. And I want you to write a couple articles for me a week that you can go super deep on, and we'll put it behind a paywall because it's valuable information. And I'll sponsor your podcast. So I will essentially pay you to be the presenting sponsor of your podcast. And it was an easy decision for me. I said, of course. And he basically he believed in me. Like, he was just like, I see your talent, and I want to let you write about whatever the hell you want to write about and talk about on your podcast whatever the hell you want to talk about. So I got extremely lucky in that situation that I had somebody who was pretty high up in the industry and really successful in the industry, love my work and believe in me. But the only reason, again, why that happened was because of that initial DM that I sent to him. Right. So that was essentially how the whole Rick thing got started, where I asked him for career advice, and he basically was like, dude, I work for me, for me. And it was a very easy decision, and one I'm very happy that I made.
Yeah, that's great. And, more times than not, that's what you have to do. And that's the approach that you have to take, to make that happen. So at the score, were you trying to tell them, I want to write about this, this, and this? And
oh,
they
yeah.
Say, no.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty much. And to be honest with you, it was a miscommunication on both ends. And I left that company on really good terms with the people there. I just said, look, this job isn't really part of the thing that made it a pretty easy decision too, is in Canada, they had a deal with a couple sports books, or there were certain gambling regulations in Canada. So I would have had to end my podcast working for them too. So not only would I have not gotten to do writing on the types of stuff that I would have wanted to write about, but I wouldn't have been able to continue to my podcast. And that was one of the things that I asked Rick about. I said, hey, here are the numbers of my podcast. Here are the amount of people that listen to my podcast. Do you think this thing has any legs? Do you think it has any steam? And he was like, dude, you'd be surprised. The amount of people that listen to your podcast is like way more than like for this little niche industry of golf. You have something. You have a real following here. And I think it would be really dumb of you to stop your podcast, because you're picking up momentum with it quickly. And I ended up picking up more momentum with it once Rick started sponsoring it, and once I signed the deal with Blue Wire to start sponsoring it as well. So it ended up being a smart decision where now the podcast is profitable. And by the way, it's really hard for a podcast to be profitable. Like 2% of podcasts actually make money. It's really hard and that's what I think a lot of people that start podcasts don't realize is like, oh, I can start this podcast and then, I can find a couple advertisers and start making money. It's like, dude, I did not make a single cent on my podcast for like 6 months straight. And it really wasn't until I had a following of in the thousands of people regular listening every single week where I was able to even attempt to make a profit off the podcast. So it's hard, but I was able to, Rick was basically like, dude, you have to quit. And I will sponsor your podcast for you to be able to keep doing it, because you should not give this up.
That's amazing. When did you start seeing like those 1,000 numbers? Because that's pretty much, when it started to really take off, right?
Yeah. There was a big leap for me at the beginning of last year. So like last year's Kapalua, there was a big jump for me. And that was the time that I started working for Rick, was like January, February of last year. So like at the start of last season was when I experienced a pretty big jump. And it didn't happen overnight. It wasn't like 1 week 600 people were listening to my podcast and the next week 2,500 were listening to my podcast, or 3,500 were listening to my podcast. It was a steady build, I think, over time. But I think the beginning of last year was when I started cracking in past the 1,000 mark in listeners. And, I think, to give credit to Rick, it was around the same time I started talking about Rick's website on the podcast. So I think a lot of the people that are regular listeners of Rick and regular, he had way before me already built up a massive website and following, and like a big, his Slack channel on Rick Run Good, like it is active with so many people. Because again, like so many people use that web, and that's why I say it's the best deal in golf, because you don't have to read any of my articles or like any of my articles to find a ton of value in that website. I mean, it's the largest statistical fantasy golf and betting focused database on the internet, right? So it was around that time where I partnered with Rick, and I think I started to get some of those loyal Rick followers starting to listen to mine. And there were jumps along the way too. Like, Mayo asked me to be a guest on his podcast a couple times, and that definitely opened me up to the Mayo listeners and stuff like that. And I became really good friends with Jeff Feinberg, and who I now do a show with on Odds Checker. And so I was able to get some of the Pat Mayo and Jeff Feinberg listeners being interested in me. And yeah, I mean, I guess it was that kind of time of year.
That's great. To get into something with golf betting real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I've been thinking about a lot lately. Well, since I kind of started getting into it, on rickrungood.com, looking at all, strokes gain metrics, course fit and stuff like that. Do you think that sometimes we tend to dive in too much regarding the strokes per the course, the course fit based on a player, rather than just like how this guy has been playing the past 2, 3, 4 events. He could be the worst fit for that tournament and that course, but we kind of shy away from that, just given that he is not fit for that course. I kind of wanted to see where you really draw that line between, like, all right, you're looking at a guy who's been playing unbelievable, last 3, 4 events, horrible course fit here, horrible, past experience here. When do you kind of draw that line? Because that's the type of thing. You know what I'm talking about?
Dude, completely. So you're basically asking like the biggest question in golf betting that we have to deal with every week, which is course fit versus recent form. Right? Like, and to me, I always fall on the side of recent form. It changes week to week. I mean, it's a nuanced question. There's certain golf courses, like for example, Jordan Spieth can show up to Pebble Beach and he doesn't need to be in good form for him to play well there. But I would say that I generally fall on the side of recent form, because I think about even just like thinking about this as a logical approach, as somebody that plays golf I have been playing golf since I was 8 years old. I still play like twice a week. So like for me, when I'm playing well, like I can play well at pretty much any course. But if I'm not playing well, I will show up to my home course in LA, which I know like the back of my hand. And if there's something wrong with my swing, then there's something wrong with my swing. I'm not going to shoot a good score. Even maybe I'll shoot a little bit of a better score than I would if I was going to like a completely random course, because it's my home course. Maybe I'll save a few strokes, but like if I don't have it, if there's something wrong with my swing or my putting stroke or whatever, like I'm not going to play well. So I generally favor recent form over course history. Does that answer your question?
Yeah. That definitely makes sense, because half the time with the stuff, that's what you kind of fall back on when you're kind of dialing on a tournament and stuff like that. So it's cool to see kind of your perspective on that. So yeah, that's great, man. I appreciate you sharing your story there, and it's really cool to just to hear it from a face-to-face basis like this. Kind of getting into this week.
Can I just say really quickly too, like I appreciate you asking me, because I do now get a lot of podcast requests, and I will be honest, at the beginning I said yes to absolutely everything. I had a couple experiences where I said yes to a guy and he he didn't know who I was at all. And he wasn't he just asked me on my podcast because he saw on his podcast because he saw how many followers that I had, but he wasn't prepared and he didn't know a thing about golf. And so I stopped saying yes to podcasts unless I really, knew the guy or the guy asked me in a really thoughtful way, which you did. So I would say, I don't know how serious you are about about the podcast that you do, if it's more of a hobby for you or if it's the type of thing that you could see yourself doing in a more serious route, but you're going about it in the exact right way, or at least the way that I did when I was first starting out, which is hey, man, ask people that you respect on your podcast, be familiar with their work, and really, pay attention and be attentive to stuff like that. And so I appreciate you having me on, because I will be honest, I don't say yes anymore to a lot of the people that I'm not familiar with, but you had a good sell, and I could tell that you did your homework.
Appreciate that. Yeah. And, I started this thing, I've been so into golf my whole life, really kind of start diving into the golf betting side of things past 2-3 years, more so into the strokes, the analytics and stuff like that. So yeah, I have a full-time job now, and what
do you do for work, if you don't mind me asking?
I'm in real estate.
Okay.
Real estate finance. So
commercial or
multifamily.
Okay, cool.
I work for a lender shop. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
So but that's what I'm doing now. And then this on the side is something that I'm obviously would love to have, a full-time gig for it, something that I can say that, this is going to pay the bills and stuff like that. So, I'm keeping consistent. I'm dialing in every week, recording every week. I also do a Wednesday discussion show where I talk about DFS. I go over the betting board. I give a course preview and stuff like that. And to be honest, man, you were a big influence on that. And
thank you.
Just seeing your stuff and how you go about talking about a golf course, talking about a tournament. It's fascinating to me. So I was like, I'm already locked into all these tournaments. Why not just express it? So
yeah. Do you see it being more of an individual podcast, or the type of thing where you want to have a guest on every single week?
So the podcast we record every Monday night. We're going to record tonight. It's actually me, my dad, and my brother.
Okay, so that's a regular Monday night thing where you guys do every. Okay, cool. Yep.
Every Monday night. So we actually started after the wild card weekend in football. We were doing football recaps. We were doing previews for the conference rounds.
Okay, so you're thinking more broader, all sports at this, for the Monday one.
Pretty much all sports. But now we're getting into the thick of the golf season. We also we talked about golf towards the second half of those football discussions. So now that we're getting into the juice of the golf season, it's going to be strictly golf now. That's where I kind of wanted to get to, just strictly golf. So yeah, man. We're grinding away. We're being consistent. We're going every week. I feel like that's kind of how you have to look at it and how you have to go about it. So
you do a Monday night one with your dad and your brother, and then the Wednesday one that you do is solo.
Solo, just me, DFS betting, and then cool. I talk about the course and tournament and stuff like that.
Cool. And I guess so this episode with me is just like a bonus. You don't usually have guests. No, that's a good format to follow. That's what I do generally, is I will do a Sunday solo podcast. Now with all the stuff I have on my plate, I only do it for the bigger events. But then, the main podcast is a one with a guest every week. But that's good. I mean, I'll definitely check out your solo Wednesday one and also the Monday night one.
Yeah. And even podcasts like this, just people in the industry, you're right off the bat. And I love to keep going, with different guys on Twitter, whoever it is within the golf world. So hopefully someone gets a hold of this and we can get a couple clicks here, and then we could take it off from there. But I think this is a pretty good start.
Absolutely, man. Let me know if you need any help with that too, in terms of like getting other guests or stuff like that. Like that was the thing for me at the beginning. Like I'm not kidding. When Rick went on my podcast, I think I had like 50 followers on Twitter. So, you'd be surprised how many people say yes. You know what I mean? So I made a habit of like, I would ask guys to come on my podcast when literally I had like 50 followers on Twitter, and you'd be surprised how many people say yes. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, that's why I took the shot with you. And, the main reason why I did that is because ever since I started doing this, all I did was just read your stuff, watch your stuff, and, to just, see it face to face now, like this, it's really coming full circle. So going to keep grinding at it, man.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's finish up with some Honda. What do you got for Honda?
Let's finish up with some Honda. So obviously first one on the Florida swing, weak field, tough course, PGA National. You talked a lot about you're a big long shot guy, so I think this is actually the perfect tournament to kind of get geared towards a long shot, just given the weak field. I think top of the leaderboard, Sung J M, and in your article you even said today, even with a Sung J like B+, even less than that kind of performance, he still could get beat very easily. Any long shots you are gearing towards this week?
Well, it's interesting because I really had my eyes on Danny Lee, and then I find out that he's a member of the Ironheads on Live this morning. So I will no longer have Danny Lee at 250 to 1 on my betting card. But there are a ton of guys. I mean, the thing is like some of the guys, like I bet Lee Hodges last week at like 300 to 1. And he's 50 to 1 this week. So I don't know if I could really, and I'm sticking it out with him. He was very kind to me last week. I mean, I played him at DraftKings at 6,200. I think he's 7,800 this week. So I don't know if you would qualify that as a long shot, but I love the way that he's playing. He finished 9th at this tournament last year, so he's got some pretty good course history as well. Adam Long is another guy at 130 to 1 and 7,200 on DraftKings that I really like. He's kind of does everything well except the irons right now, but he's the type of play. I mean, I wrote about this a lot on in my article, but I'm looking for guys that have like a proven track record of success on water intensive courses. So I'm looking a lot at like TPC Twin Cities and TPC Sawgrass and TPC Southwind, because those are all courses that you basically have to deal with water on 13, 14, 15 out of your holes. And to be honest, that spooks the shit out of some players. Like that's just not comfortable for players off the tee. Like for example, like I do not like playing golf in Florida. That is not my favorite type of golf. I do not feel comfortable on golf courses where there's water on every single tee shot, right? Like I like room to operate off the tee. I like going to places like Bandon Dunes where you have these giant fairways and it kind of asks you different questions than what a Florida golf course is basically asking you. So I was really looking at some of those guys that have a good track records of success, not just at the Honda, but also at some of those water intensive courses. So yeah, Adam Long, Lee Hodges, a little bit closer to the top, like I bet Taylor Pendrith and yeah, that's a good one too. But no, I haven't made too many more moves than that so far.
Yeah. Two guys I'm on now, Seabez and Dietrich. It's got to be Dietrich soon. I've been on him every single. I love Dietrich.
He's big time on my radar this week too. The only concern I have for him is I wish that he had played this course before. Yeah. Not that you can't come in here and contend on your first appearance, but I wish he'd played the course at least once.
Yeah, and honestly, that's how it's been like the past few weeks. Like Torrey hasn't played, Pebble hasn't played, and I just keep riding him out. But
Yeah, I love Dietrich too. Yeah, he's talented as hell.
yeah, that's cool. So yeah, we'll have a great tournament in store this weekend. I know it's a weaker field, but I always love the Honda. So excited with that. Yeah, man, really appreciate you coming on again. The kind words, and if you ever want to come on again, just let me know, and we'll get something going like that. But I don't want to keep you here too long. So once again, just appreciate all the words and coming on to the pod, man. It's been
of course, man. Absolutely. This is a blast, and I'll retweet this episode and do anything I can to help you out as we go forward. But thanks for having me on, dude. This is fun.
Yes, sir. All right, guys. Thanks, Andy. Peace, fellas.
Thank you, sir.